Subject this morning, building world brotherhood. Building world brotherhood. One thing's sure, that you cannot regiment people into brotherhood. It's impossible, because brotherhood is of the heart, not in the political field. Brotherhood is concerned with the heart, and as the Master said, when you change the hearts of men, and not until then can you hope to have world brotherhood. Because when you change the hearts of men, then men feel the underlying love of God which is in the hearts of all. Feeling that, then they know, not just think it, they know we are all brothers in that one great love of God. And so that's why many attempts to regiment people into world brotherhood and such things do not succeed, because brotherhood is of the heart. But when you change the hearts of men, then and only then will world brotherhood come. We have in the Bhagavad Gita a nice reference which I'd like to give you at this time. We also have some in the Bible which I will also bring forth. In the Gita, in the 10th discourse, the 20th line, we read as follows: I am the self seated in the heart of all beings. I am the self seated in the heart of all beings. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so it is quite obvious that the common denominator, if we can call it that, is God's love. It is that which is in each and every one of us. If we can change our hearts, that we feel and know that one love of God, then brotherhood is possible. Because, once more, God alone is. And one of the great aspects of God is not only His power, but His love. And so the love, the natural love of God in our hearts has to be cultivated. And when it is cultivated and blossoms forth so that we perceive it not only limited to our heart and consciousness, but in all beings, all creatures, then true brotherhood can come on earth. We have some wonderful Bible references also along the same line, the underlying unity of brotherhood being in recognizing and knowing and being one with God's great love. We have in St. John, 1 John rather, the 4th chapter, the 7th verse: Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and every one that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. Every one that loveth means every one whose heart is changed is born of God. Not just loveth in the ordinary way, but perceiveth the underlying universal aspect of God's great love. It is in those people that the heart is changed. And more, as the hearts of men are changed, more and more true brotherhood will come. Also, we have in 1 John, the 2nd chapter, 5th, 8th, 10th, and 11th verses, whereby we are admonished to keep on with our search for God, changing day by day, week by week, year by year, the love in our hearts. But whosoever keepeth His word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. The love is there, but we have to perfect it so that it contain the universal love of God, not just the individual love. The Master used to say it this way: the cup of perception must be enlarged that it hold the great love of God. And so here we have it most beautifully said: But whosoever keepeth His word, keepeth in the holy vibration. Just by thinking your love will expand and contain all love won't do it. You have to go where the universal love of God is, in the holy vibration. Keep in that. That's why the saints kept saying, Long continued concentration on the liberating spiritual eye frees the devotee from all delusion and gives him the freedom of oneness with God's light and love. Love is the great aspect of God. And so, he whosoever keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. It has to be perfected so that you feel it in everyone, not just in your family, not just in those of your country, not just in all those of the world, but in every living creature. That's perfecting the love of God in you. And then in the 8th verse, again, a new commandment I write unto you, because the darkness is past. Those of you who are trying, as we all are, to perfect that love within us, the darkness is passing. Therefore, a new commandment I write unto you, because the darkness is past, and the true light is now shining. Namely, in the 10th verse, he that loveth his brother abideth in the light. You cannot love another unless you are in God's light, truly. He that loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there is no occasion of stumbling in him. How can you stumble if God is with you, and you feel his all-protecting love? You cannot stumble. But he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he goeth. Why? Because that darkness hath blinded his eyes. There is no darkness like the darkness of ignorance and delusion. It's very difficult to get out of it. That's why the channel of self-realization is so wonderful, because it helps us to get out of the darkness of delusion that we may perfect ourselves in God's great love. And finally, conclusion of the Bible truth, 1 John, the 5th chapter, the 1st verse. And every one that loveth him that begat, loveth him also that is begotten of him. You cannot love one and not the other. If you love God, you love all his creatures. And until you perceive him in all the creatures, you cannot really love them. And so, when the hearts of men are changed, then brotherhood, world brotherhood will come. And we can build that world brotherhood by endeavoring day by day to change our hearts, that we can hold the great love of God. That's how world brotherhood will come, not by regimentation and rules and regulations, but by changing the hearts of men. A great man who knew something about God's love was Gandhi. Gandhi, although we may not all agree with his methods, but he felt that underlying love of God in all creatures. Otherwise, he could not have taken the stand which he did. And what happened because he took that wonderful stand of nonviolence? He took it because he felt the underlying universal love of God in everything, all creatures. What happened? India received her independence in a strange way, because the force of God's love is greater than all the navies and armies in the world. He also did some other wonderful things. He spoke against untouchability and caste system in India, and against the fact that widows could not marry and such things. Purdah. Why? Because he felt God's love in himself first and in all others. That's why Gandhi was great, because he felt the universal presence of God in all others. That's why he could do what he did. Jail didn't mean much to him, because God's love was in jail as well as any place. We have to know that underlying love of God. And I want to just at this time read just a word or two from the book Hindu Dharma, which means, Dharma means law, and universal law is truth. Truth is what will be behind world brotherhood when we change the hearts of men. And so we read in Gandhi's books just 1 or 2 lines first. He says, our scriptures have declared there is no Dharma, that is law, higher than truth. I do not claim to have originated any new principle or doctrine. I have simply tried in my own way to apply the eternal truths to our daily life and problems. Also on page 14, I want to identify myself with everything that lives. Don't you think he felt the universal presence of God's love in him and in all creatures? Certainly. In the language of the Gita, I want to live at peace with both friend and foe. Though therefore a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu may despise me and hate me, I want to love him and serve him even as I would love my wife or son, though they hate me. His concepts are wonderful. He is pointing out that he has tasted the universal love of God in his heart. So my patriotism is for me a stage in my journey to the land of eternal freedom and peace. Thus it will be seen that for me there are no politics devoid of religion. They subserve religion. Politics bereft of religion are a death trap because they kill the soul. Look about us. Look how politics is being played in this world of ours. They're getting nowhere because they're not going to the cause which is in the hearts of men. And finally, lastly, I know no solution of the many difficulties that face the whole of the human family except in two things that I am saying everywhere. And one of those problems is the problem of brotherhood. Speak the truth and remain nonviolent at any cost. Here he shows that he recognized the one eternal truth that God is all, God alone, and that a manifestation of God alone is love, which is in the hearts of everyone. I know as certainly as I know that I am sitting in front of you and speaking to you, that if I could but persuade you to understand the spirit of these two things, how can you have nonviolence to your enemies unless you feel God in the enemy? It's impossible. So that's how world brotherhood will come. When we feel love in the hearts of all, including those who hate us. Why? Because they're still God's children. And so he says, I know as certainly as I know that I am sitting in front of you and speaking to you, that if I could persuade you to understand the spirit of these two things and act upon them, every one of our difficulties would disappear like straw before wind. All difficulties will disappear if you feel the universal presence of God in everyone. Even your enemies look good to you because God's in them and you feel and know it. And so Gandhi says, if we could do that, our difficulties will disappear like straw before the wind, and God will descend from his great right throne and live in your midst, and he will say, you Hindus have done well. And that applies to everybody. And so Gandhi, a great soul, why? Because he appreciated the underlying cause of all illusion, which is the lack of world brotherhood, as the lack of the realization of the one underlying love of God. Now, going on just a bit, I like, and I know you all like, Paramahansaji's method of self-realization, and I think it is the best. Why? That is, on the subject of world brotherhood, because it gives us the positive way to change the hearts of men. That's why it's so wonderful. It gives you something real. It's all right for me to get up here and speak and say we must change the hearts of men, then we'll all love one another and everything will be fine. But how are you going to do it? You're going to do it by following one who had done it and who felt God's great love in everything and everyone. The Master was one such. And he left the ways and the means whereby each and every one who will follow him will feel their heart change, without question of a doubt, until it can receive and hold the universal presence of God's great love. That's why self-realization seems to me to be the logical way to bring about the change in the hearts of men and therefore world brotherhood. Now, the house of world brotherhood is made up. The building blocks of the house of world brotherhood is made up not just of human beings, ordinary human beings, but individual souls. And what are individual souls? They're souls that are dynamic, not sleeping, not dead. Remember that if you want to build world brotherhood, you must know that you as a soul are a part of God, and that in you is God's love. That's what I mean when I say the building blocks of world brotherhood consist of individual souls who are aroused and who are dynamic. If we can do that, if we can change our hearts, then we can bring about world brotherhood. You cannot do it by force. You cannot do it by regimentation. You can do it only through the power of God's love. And that's in each and every one of us. Let us get hold of it through, to me, the best channel, the channel which the Master has left, the channel of self-realization. I remember one time the Master visited President Coolidge, and he went down to see him at the time when disarmament was in vogue. And Coolidge never said much, but the Master talked to him, and he said, "Finally, Mr. President, don't you think that even though they take away the battleships, that the human beings will fight with sticks and stones and with their fists?" President Coolidge says, "I think it's so," he says. He was a man of very few words, but he knew those things. The Master said he was one of our greatest spiritual presidents, presidents with the greatest spiritual nature. And so, even though we take away the implements of war, then human beings, until their hearts are changed, will fight even with their fists and sticks and stones. And so if we want to work for, as our subject is, building world brotherhood, let us build along the positive lines of changing ourselves, that we become dynamic individual rays of God's power and His light. And so, finally, one illustration about how God's great love will change people. When I first met the Master in Boston, 1920, getting longer and longer ago, 1920, first night I went in skeptical. World brotherhood is all right, but I had to be shown. I was skeptical for many reasons. I'd studied and I'd heard all about, of course, the bad things in India, which always happens. Delusion flourishes nicely on evil. And so I'd heard about these discrepancies about the fakers of India and all that. So I went in pretty skeptical, with a chip on the shoulder, to see the Master the first time. But I had searched real hard for truth. And so underlying that superficial skepticism was a great desire to know the reality of life and truth. So I went to him and met him. And he smiled, and we talked a little bit. And finally, I told him that I didn't understand certain things, and he said, "Why? Because how can the blind lead the blind? They both fall into the same ditch." That sounded reasonable. And I said, "Do you know those things?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Do you think I could know them?" He says, "I think so." I said, "Show me." He said, "All right." Then we talked a little more. Then he brought out a tiger skin and placed it on the floor, and he sat on one end of the tiger skin. He asked me to sit on the other, which I somehow did. Cross-legged, got them down under there somehow. And then, what did he do? He looked at me with his great big eyes, and what did he say? He says, "Doctor," he says, "will you always love me as I love you?" That removed the barriers right off, instantly. Because the force of God's love, that wasn't any emotion or anything. That was truth. And by the grace of God, somehow I recognized it. And I said, "Yes, I will." That lifted the barriers immediately of prejudice and superstition which I had, and so will that same love lift the barriers which prevent the coming of world brotherhood. And that's why I feel self-realization is so wonderful, because I know that the one who founded this self-realization had the love of God in his heart and was able to transmit it to another one. And each and every one of us can do the same if we will make ourselves fit and perfect instruments. Remember, that's the only way world brotherhood will come. The Bhagavad Gita says, "All men walk the earth wholly deluded." What chance have we? All men walk the earth wholly deluded, thinking that they're individual and not a part of God. But the Gita also says, in the next line, Krishna says, get out of my delusion. He might have added, get out of my delusion if you want world brotherhood. And so, in conclusion, self-realization, if you follow it, will allow the light of God's all-pervading, all-enlightening love to flow through you, as we sang in our chant, which eradicates all delusion and all evil. Follow that, because it has been given to us by one who knew that and felt it, and one who said these words, which we can apply to the subject this morning of bringing world brotherhood. If anyone hates me, I don't hate them. I give them love. Why? Because I feel the love in my heart. I give them love and wait for them to change. Isn't that wonderful? Can you do that? Someone does you mean? Can you say, all right, Father, you are in them? It is you who is sitting in the heart, even of that one who seems to hate me. Can you do that? You have to do it. Now, when we all do that, as much as possible, by following one who could do it as the beloved Master, then our hearts will be changed, and we will see in everybody the same one Father. It seems impossible. It is not impossible. You may be high-spirited, honest, of great integrity. You hate the mean things of life, but still you can. By cultivating that love of God which is in your heart, you can see beyond that position which you have taken of loyalty and honesty. You can see in spite of that, you hate those evil things, you can see in each and every one of God's children that same love. When you see that, you will realize there are things greater than ordinary personal integrity. The greatest thing is the love of God in the hearts of all of His children.